Welcome to the first session of RQYS's online training program, Race Management for On-Water Volunteers. This first session is essentially an overview of the signal flags that we use on the water for the start and after the start. We'll go into a bit more detail about how they all work and what it all means in other sessions, but this is just a broad overview of all of the flags that you'll see out during a yacht race. The first one is the orange flag. Now, it used to be called the on-station flag, but it's now referred to as the starting line flag. Back in the day, it was essentially you go out, you put your anchor down, when you're ready you put your orange flag up and you start the race at whatever time you needed to start the race. But essentially it's changed subtly in the way it's used, and generally what we do now is we put it up with one sound at least 5 minutes before the warning signal. At least 5, so it can be longer, but generally it's 5 minutes. What it does is it signals one end, or it constitutes one end of the starting line. So the pole, the halyard on which that orange flag is hoisted, is one end of the start line. The next flag that we have is the warning signal, or it's usually the class flag. It doesn't have to be. It's described in the sailing instructions. It goes up with one sound 5 minutes before the start. And at that time, we usually have the course that the sailors are going to race over and the bearing to the first mark posted on the back of the boat, either at or before that warning signal. The next signal is the preparatory signal, and the race officer has a few options here, but usually we use P, the blue and white one. One sound when it goes up, and it means that there's 1 minute, it goes up 1 minute after the warning signal, and it means there's 4 minutes to the start. At that point, when the preparatory signal goes up, the racing rules apply. And some of the other flags, if we're not using P, have penalties attached to them. At this point in time also, we have to stop adjusting the start line. That flag comes down with one sound 1 minute before the start. And at that point, any penalties that are attached, if you like, to these other preparatory signals, those penalties begin to apply. Then 1 minute after the preparatory signal comes down, the warning signal, or the class flag, comes down to signify the start. Essentially at the start, all the start sequence flags should be down. Now, if we have some premature starters, we need to signal either an individual recall or a general recall. The individual recall, we use code flag X, this blue and white, blue cross on a white background. It isn't used if the preparatory signal was either yellow or black, but for all other preparatory signal starts, we can have an individual recall. It has to go up in 4 seconds, so there's not a lot of time to determine whether you're going to choose an individual recall or a general recall. So the start team has to be on their toes. Essentially, it stays up. It's used in the first instance if we can identify all of the people that were premature starters, that were early. Once they all return and start correctly, that flag comes down. If they don't all come back, we bring that flag down 4 minutes after that start, or 1 minute before some other signals are going to be made. And there's no sound when the code flag X comes down, when that individual recall comes down. The other option we have is a general recall. So the start flags come down with one sound, and if there's a general recall, there's 2 other sounds when we hoist this first substitute, or the general recall flag. Essentially, we like to try and get the next start away as soon as possible. So the best effort is to try and get that general recall flag down 1 minute after that previous start. But there's only one sound when it's dropped, typo on the slide, and 1 minute between dropping that signal is the next signal has to be made. Now if we had a black preparatory signal, there are some consequences that go with the general recall for those boats that were on course side, and there's a process that has to be gone through with that. So we may not be able to get into the next start as soon as possible, and in some occasions we can also perhaps put the postponement flag up before the next start. Now if we are postponing races, the flag that we use is this red and white flag, called the answering pennant, or the postponement flag, or AP flag. When it goes up there are two sounds, and when it comes down there's one sound. And what it means is that any races that have not been started are postponed. And again, when it comes down with one sound, there's a minute later something has to happen. So the next signal, usually the warning signal, occurs. We can put other flags with it. We can put AP over H, this red and white flag here. That means that all races that haven't been started are postponed and there's further signals ashore. And it's a very useful safety tool to get the sailors back to the shore if we need to, if there's a storm coming or something and we want to get them off the water. And then the signals are taken over on shore. The other thing we can do is put up AP over A, this blue and white flag, or the diver below flag, some of you might be familiar with. An AP over A means anything that's races that haven't been started are postponed and there's no more racing today. That's it for the day. The other option we have is to postpone for a period of time, and that period of time is signalled by a numeral flag which corresponds to 1 hour, or numeral 2, 2 hours, numeral 3, 3 hours, and so on. And we have the option of using up to 9 for 9 hours, although I've never seen that done. But essentially what it means is we're postponing the start for 3 hours. We can't bring it back any sooner. We can postpone it longer at some stage if we wish, but we can't bring it earlier. Another thing we can do is abandon a race that's been started. When we abandon a race, we have 3 sounds as the flag goes up. It means that all races that have started are abandoned and returned to the starting area. And again, the next signal has to be, once it comes down with one sound, the next signal is made 1 minute later, and it's usually the warning signal. And again, we can combine it with other flags for different meanings. So N over H means further signals ashore, and again it's can be a useful safety tool to get the boats off the water and ashore if you need to. N over A means that's it, no more racing today, go home essentially. Another signal we can make once this race has been started is to change the bearing of the next leg for the sailors. And then we display code flag C, and we make multiple sounds. And the description is that it's a repetitive sound signal. So it's a very definite, repetitive sound. And it can be more silence and less sound. You don't have to bombard your ears with it. But it's at least 5 signals at any one time, and you're drawing the sailor's attention to the signals that you're making. Code flag C is never displayed on its own. It's used in conjunction with other signals. So it may be, if we've moved the mark to the right, to starboard, we use C and a green shape. If we've moved the mark to the left, we use C and a red shape, to port. That's usually for classes that don't have a compass. For classes that do have a compass, we use a bearing, the bearing. We actually give them the bearing to that mark. The other thing we can do is we can decrease or increase the length of the leg, in which case we use either a plus if we're extending the length of the leg or a minus if we're reducing the length of the leg. Now these things don't have to be flags, they can be an object of similar appearance, and this is an example of an object of similar appearance. So we have C, we have a red or a green, obviously you wouldn't display them both at one time. We have a minus, we can change that into a plus, and we have the option for a bearing. So obviously you wouldn't have both the bearing and the red or the green, you'd have one or the other. So if we've got boats that don't have compasses, we just make sure that there's no bearing displayed on the board. And we just have the green or the appropriate signal. So this means we're changing the course to starboard and it's got longer. Okay. Now, the other thing we need to think about here is the language that we use. When we're reducing the length of the leg, we try and avoid the use of the term shorten, and we talk about reducing or decreasing the length of the leg, because shorten means something else entirely. When we shorten a course, we're actually setting up a finish at that mark. So we put up this flag, code flag S, with two sounds. And we're setting up a finish line, so we set that up in the same way that you would any finish. So if the boats are going upwind, we set the finish line square to the wind from at that mark. If they're reaching, we set it up at 90 degrees to the direction from which they're coming. If it's at a gate, then the finish becomes that gate. And this is one of those signals that we have a bit of a tension, if you like, about its display. It has to be made early enough so that the sailors can change whatever tactics they are using because they're about to finish, as opposed to having another two legs. However, they have to be able to hear the signal as well. So we need to make it soon enough so that they understand what's happening and they can change what they're doing if they need to, but we have to make it late enough so they can hear it. The other thing is next flag, code flag L. This has two meanings depending on where it's displayed. It goes up with one sound, and when we use it ashore, it means that a notice to competitors has been posted on the notice board, so hey guys, go have a look. If we use it ashore, it means come within hail officially, or come see me, I've got some information for you. Or it means follow me. So most commonly when it's used afloat, it is used to say we're going to move this start boat. The wind's changed direction, whatever, we're moving from here over there, follow us. Some other signals we can make, again depending on the classes that we're running races for. In their class rules, they may have the option to turn Rule 42 on or off. Now, Rule 42 applies to pumping, ooching, those kinds of things. And normally, Rule 42 says, thou shalt not do this. However, some classes, as the wind gets stronger, turn 42 off. So we have the option to display this on O flag, or Oscar, on the start boat, which then applies to the whole race. Or we can display these flags at marks around the course. And from that point then, if we use Oscar, we're turning 42 off, or if we're using Romeo, R, we're reinstating 42. And when we put the flag up, we have repetitive sounds again, the same that we had for a change of course. We're doing the same signal to draw their attention to the fact that we've got some flags that we need them to take notice of. Now, the other thing is that when we are giving information to sailors, we use the main signal flag, like the postponement flag. But if we've got a number of classes on the course, we can use the class flag as well. And so we put display the class flag with the abandon flag or the postponement flag. However, the norm is, and the way they should be displayed, is that the postponement flag should be at the top, and then the class to which it applies is underneath. And this was a lovely photo that appeared on the International Sailing website during the London Olympics with the flags up the wrong way round. So it's very easy to make a mistake. This one went around the world before people realised that it was wrong. Now, this is basically a summary of the things that the race officer needs from you as an on-water volunteer. Ideally, you need to be familiar, you don't have to know them back to front, but at least be familiar with signal flags and the sound signals that go with them, and know that there are particular sounds for particular flags, and have some idea of what they might mean. Always check with the race officer before putting up or removing any flags. Usually there has to be a sound going with the flag going up or the flag coming down. Make sure that all the flags that you need are on the boat before you actually leave the beach, and have an idea of where you're going to put the flags, or understanding of where you're going to put the flags on the boat, so that the signals are clear to the sailors. Ideally, have all the flags that you're likely to use for that start ready on the boat, close to hand, and have some understanding of the process of the start, so that you know and can anticipate when to put flags up and remove them. Now, there are some competencies required of a signal person at RQYS, and this is a list of some of them. The signal person is really quite key. They work with the race officer and the timer, and there's a very close conversation that goes on there. But essentially, you need to understand that there is information in the Notice of Race and Sailing Instructions that can help you in your job. You need to be able to identify the flags. You take all timing from the timekeeper. We talked about the flags being on board before you leave and getting them things ready on the boat. We talked about knowing the sounds that go with flags and making sure that the signals are displayed at the right time. There is in the rule book a race signal section, and they are rules. So they are part of the racing rules of sailing, and that's essentially what we're doing every time we start and manage a race. So know that they're there, know what they are. Sometimes it's very handy to have them with you on the boat. And understand that you're sending a message to the competitors, and understand that either putting up the flag or removing the flag is sending some information to the sailors. Now, this is a bit of a question around your knowledge, I guess, of what sounds accompany these flags going up or down. So we won't go through that here, but just have a look at them and think about whether you understand what signals accompany those flags. So in summary, we've talked about race management signals, particularly start signals and the signals that happen after the start, and there are some other ones that may or may not be used all the time. And thank you.